I see we're going to have a lot of. All right, so I just got a note to leave the meeting. That's really short.
No. You can't leave yet, Britt. We have some questions for you before then. Well, great. I want to make use of every minute that we have with Britt, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself if you're not Britt, that would be great. Feel free to unmute later when we get to Q&A. There's going to be a bit of an intro of Kernel. Then there's going to be a few questions that we have for Britt while we have his time that I have prepared, and then hopefully some time for Q&A. So that is the structure, and we'll get started here. So the first thing to be said is that we're at Module 7 of Kernel, which is the 8th and final week of Kernel. The title of this week is The Gifts. And it's a very meaningful week to have Britt Harris here today, because without the Titans of Investing program that he created in 2006, we would not be able to have Kernel. It would not be something that exists in this form. And there's a lot of things that he gave via Titans as gifts that represent patterns that now are a part of Kernel. The first of this is the focus on getting together an incredible group of people. And so Britt, so you have a good sense of the people that are around here. You'll notice some of these things that describe a Kernel Fellow. A Kernel Fellow, as listed, is technically competent, high character, available to share their energy with talented peers, and acts with intention. Britt will know that there's one more piece of the puzzle about being willing to eat with each other that isn't included quite there, but we'll get there, I promise. This group is slightly bigger than a Titans class, in that Titans class was about 17 people, and a Kernel block includes 250 people. And this group is from 39 different countries. Their educational backgrounds span the gamut from all of the major institutions in the US, as well as England and Europe, as well as India. Engineers and developers from Instagram, Google, Coinbase, Facebook, investment backgrounds from Bridgewater, BlackRock, Pantera, and some of the bigger venture firms. And then many people building early stage companies in the cryptocurrency world, mostly in the Ethereum space. So I know Britt hosted one of the most influential Bitcoin conferences in history this last quarter in April. He had Ray Dalio, as well as literally 15 other incredible top tier investors that I won't go through naming here at that program. So he's very involved and understands what's going on in the Bitcoin world. Just as context, many people here building in Ethereum world, and of course, the one member of Titans Investing, Stan, that is with us on the call today. One thing that I wanted to point out here for mostly the Kernel Fellows as we wrap up is that 8 weeks ago, we made all of these introductions in the Kernel Slack, which is the place that we gather, given that Kernel is mostly a digital space that increasingly in COVID times, hopefully will be physical. But we wanted to kind of bring that same spirit that was brought when you entered Titans, which was this sense of awe, frankly, at the people that are around you. And Britt did something very special that somehow, allowed us to be as much in awe about the people that are around us in the class that we were with going through the program together with, as we were, let's say, in awe of his ability as an investor. It was as much about the people that were around us. And there's a quote that Callie Lowe on the back of this picture that I'll share better later. It's in the slide deck, but it's a quote from C.S. Lewis that describes this, I think, well. In a perfect friendship, each member of the circle feels, in his secret heart, humbled before the rest. Sometimes he wonders what he is doing there amongst his betters. He is lucky beyond measure to be in such company, especially when the whole group is together, each bringing out all that is best, wisest, or funniest in all the others. And it's hard to do this in a digital space as opposed to a physical space that Britt was able to gift us in many ways that was much beyond what I had ever seen before, both from a university setting, but generally in life. But we've tried, and with your efforts as Kernel Fellows, I think very much succeeded in creating a space like that. We had all of these intros. This is 8 of 200 people from all around the world. Alicia's in New Zealand, Ting Ting was at Berkeley in Taiwan, Mike, founder of a project called Idea Markets, Amir, Tegan, Amy, and Stephen, just examples of hundreds of other intros in that channel, which I hope some of you remember as well as I do. We went through 16 modules, 1 personal lesson and 1 Web3 lesson a week, which again follows the Titans model, which is up in the top right corner there, which is from my spring 2015 syllabus, where there was 8 lessons, or 8 times we met, each class with a finance lesson and a personal question. Questions like, why should you become successful? What are your personal constraints? How do you make decisions? Who is right to love? Who is your neighbor? And it was this as inspiration that allowed us to think about a kernel syllabus that had both personal and Web3 lessons. And we'll get to giving and scalability for this week soon. The other huge element is that in the class format, if I go back to my 2015 notes, there's this idea of a Junto model, which is designed as a society for mutual self-improvement. It was populated by Ben Franklin, and Britt showed it to us by allowing us to do the first 10 Juntos I ever did in the comfort of Britt's home in College Station, Texas, that he made available to all 17 of us whenever we wanted. We had the key. We just couldn't break anything, but we did break a couple things. It was okay. We didn't get in too much trouble. And Britt, we've managed to take that into an online type environment. You see Matt Stevenson here, who we've been very grateful to have in Kernel Block 3 as a fellow. He's a PhD student at Columbia and led a few Juntos. And these titles are titles of all the different types of Juntos that happen during Kernel Block 3. Each of these happening in a Zoom room, kind of like this one, that was limited to 8 to 10 Kernel Fellows so that they could have space for a deep conversation like the Junto setting allowed. So you have things like incentivizing shared truths that Mike led, the powerful visionary women chat that Simona led, a yoga class, a climate impact kickoff, diversity and existence by N, ideas on decentralizing media and social movements, all different types of topics that brought together small groups of people in the same Junto setting that we learned from Titans. And yes, we did eventually get to eat together. This was right as COVID was coming to an end. The first picture on the left is from the New York City dinner that we held with a combination of Indian and Mediterranean food with a group that is probably the biggest gathering of Kernel Fellows to date. There was a meeting in Miami amongst 12 or 13 and a smaller group in London. But the promise to these Kernel Fellows is that if they ever want to share a meal amongst Kernel Fellows, they will have the budget to do so. They just have to tell us and we'll pay for that type of thing, because we learned from you how important that type of thing is. And we've been very full and happy in your home many times. I'm going to try my best to introduce Britt. And I'm glad that I have some help in the next slide, but I'll try to do the basic stuff. This is very hard to go through quickly, but I'm going to try to do the abridged version. Britt started his career at Texas Utilities in Texas, working with 2 Texas A&M Aggies that were very influential in his career. He was graduating as a finance major from A&M in 1980 and spent the first about 7 or 8 years of his career moving up quite incredibly in the finance world, even to his own surprise. And as he puts it, one thing led to another, and he ended up as the CIO of Verizon, where he led investments and managed $80 billion, from where he ended up as the CEO of Bridgewater in 2006, where he managed $160 billion as a part of the largest hedge fund and perhaps most respected investment fund in the world. He left Bridgewater in 2006 partially to start Titans and to come back to Texas to lead the Texas Teachers Retirement System, which was a $130 billion pension fund, which he led for many years before taking on his current role at UTIMCO, which is the largest endowment fund in the world. It manages both Texas and Texas A&M's endowment. And in crypto, as we talk more and more about what endowments might look at in the future, Britt is perhaps the most knowledgeable person about this category and what this means to be involved in an endowment, what the purpose and the service of such a role might be. He also manages the New York, or advises the New York Fed, which is why we have to get him out of here in 45 minutes sharp, because he's meeting with the New York Fed at 10 o'clock Central. He started Titans Investing. He married his high school sweetheart, Julia, who we've all in Titans gotten to know very well, and is the backbone of the Titans program, a leader in his church, and as mentioned previously, has started to become more crypto curious. That being said, I think there's a couple other people who might be able to help introduce Britt a bit better than even I can. And I'm bringing in some backup here. First with a good friend of mine from my Titans 19 group, Malik Alachan, who I wonder if Malik is able to unmute.
I'm here. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. I'll give a quick introduction to Malik. He comes from Palestine originally and made his way to Texas A&M and was in our Titans 19 group. He's the one circled in the top left there. I'm kind of in the bottom right. And then my hope is Bria can join us in a second. He's in this picture in the bottom right with Simon, who was from Sweden and was also in our group. But more importantly, maybe in the top left, he was responsible for this young man who's taking Britt's glasses off of his face. Britt, you're muted right now, but I'll let Malik do a quick intro of basically how Britt has impacted his life.
Hey, Malik, how are you?
I'm doing great, Britt. I'm really happy to see you, and I greatly miss you. And I'm happy
as well.
Vivek organized this. So thank you so much, Vivek, for making this happen. I wanted to take a moment to tell the group about Britt and how I met Britt, if that's okay, Vivek. I met Britt back in 2015, which sounds like ages ago now for me. But I was lucky to get into Titans. If you remember, Britt, it was through Saran's rescue, through the finance department. I knew that Britt is an important person, and I knew that I was lucky to get into the class. But what I didn't know back then is that knowing Britt and being part of Titans would actually change my life and my family's life. It was late in 2015, and I remember I was struggling in finding a job. I was on a student visa, and the process to find a job in the US is quite complicated. And I remember Britt was kind enough to tap into his network and introduce me to different people. And eventually, that is how I ended up finding a job through a gentleman named Daniel McMaster. I think you remember him, Britt from UI. So that was transformative for me, because what happened is I started through that connections. I eventually landed a job at UI Houston, and I had to leave a year after because of visa complications. I ended up moving to Toronto, Canada. And the deal was you go to 1 year, but then once you're back, because you're doing well in the Houston office, you go for 1 year, we bring you back on a different visa. However, I decided to stay in Toronto because we just felt that this is a more family-friendly place, I guess. No offense, I still love Texas and I love the US. But I think that opportunity was actually very transformative. We were literally weeks away from having to leave. And we got to the point where we said, this is over. We tried, we just couldn't really make it work. But thanks to Britt, myself and my family are in a much better situation today. So Britt, thank you so much for that. Not only did you change my life, you changed my family's life. And, I think you just helped me live a richer and more fulfilling life in general, really. The 4Fs framework has tremendously helped me, and you gave me and my family chances that we're very grateful for, and we'll also carry gratitude forever for the help and for the kindness we saw from you. So thank you so much for that. And it's funny when I see the picture with Sari on your back and on your shoulders. You don't want to see how he looks now, because this picture would look totally different today. So we're not going to do that again. But thank you, Britt, and I'm so happy to be here and to see you again.
Oh, Malik, it's just been incredible getting to know you and your family. And, we're all here to help each other. And I just did a little bit and you did the rest. And everything's worked out terrifically. So is your son around 12? How old is he now?
Sadie's 8 now.
8. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's
Oh,
a bit bigger than
but he thinks he's 12. Yeah. Well, that's great.
Yeah,
I'd love to see all.
He'll be back on your back soon, I'm sure, Britt. I'm sure. We'll
Yep.
see how it goes the second time. Cool.
Yep.
I wanted, we had Bria, some other Titans here, Callie Lowe's here, Andrew Abbott, Daniel. For the sake of time, Britt, just because we have lots of questions for you, I think we're going to keep moving. It is worth noting that the top right picture here doesn't have Britt in it, but this is us swimming with 3 Olympic level swimmers who are in our Titans group, including Bria Larson, who I was hoping could join us today. She 8 years ago won gold in London and was with us in Titans in 2015, which is an incredible experience to swim together and to watch Britt jump off of a diving board.
Oh my gosh, those things are really high. I had no idea. Just the racing.
Yes, it'll always be ingrained in my memory. It was a wonderful time. But we'll keep going for now because I think that there's a lot to be covered. And the place that I want to start is with the narrow path. And Britt has given talks in the past about the narrow path and what it means to him. It was the title of a talk that he gave regarding the time in his life where he was leaving Bridgewater, where he was the CEO, to come back to Texas and to start Titan. And it was a very unique and challenging period of his life, but a very meaningful one. And I wonder, Britt, if you're willing to share a bit of the stories about what led to the start of Titans, what your intentions were when it began, and what you think it might look like into the future. What do you hope for it?
Great. Obviously, Vivek, it's great to be with you and see everybody and all the Titans here. Love. Thank you so much for being on, and everybody else. I've been really looking forward to this time. So, thanks for jumping on. So, what Vivek is talking about is something that really was profound in my own life, and it really started with I knew a man named Bob Foster, and he mentored a group of us, and he was a pretty successful guy in the field of media field. He made hundreds of millions of dollars, but he changed his life to a halftime situation, which you can do when you're very wealthy. But he spent half of his time working on his own company and half of his time trying to help people. And what he taught us was that we should divide our careers into 2 parts. And the first part is about becoming successful. And success, though, doesn't mean necessarily making millions and millions of dollars. There's a lot of things that relate to success that have nothing to do with money. Matter of fact, most of the things that are related to success and contentment and happiness have nothing to do with money. We're talking about finding out what kind of giftedness you have. We're talking about getting married, starting a family, becoming active in your community, developing a reputation. Yes, getting some financial resources, getting experience that you're going to build on later on, and also, as you're doing here, really just meeting a lot of amazing people along the way. So, as a caveat here, just before I get to what I'm going to say next is, try to accumulate high quality friendships. A lot of people have serial friendships. I was here and I had 3 friends there, and then I left there and I went to another person. And I just kind of lost track of my previous 3 friends, and I got 3 new. And so you always have 3 friends, but you should have 6, then you should have 9, then you should have 20, and then you should have 50, and then you should have 100. When you get to be 63, my age, you should have 1,000. So relationships end up being vastly more important than any kind of technical competence that you may have. So it was a little bit of relief to me that he allowed us to say, we're trying to be successful. And because in the early part of your life, that's, you have nothing, you need to establish a few things and lay a very solid foundation. But then he said to us, look, success is not the top of the ladder. success is a launching point for significance. And this guy, his name, I said the wrong name, his name is Bob Buford. And so he actually wrote a book called Halftime. And you know, like a basketball game or a football game or hockey game, I guess not hockey, you know, you play the first half and you have a score at the end of the first half, and you sort of see how you played and what you did well and what you did poorly. And you have seen other people, what they did well and what they did poorly. And then you sort of look ahead to the second half. And so around 45, when I was at Bridgewater, you know, my wife and I took this halftime experience, and we just thought about like what have we been given, and you know, what should we do with what we've been given? And we'd been given a lot, you know, financially, we were sort of way ahead of what anything that we thought we would be. Our family was really healthy, and you know, our faith was really strong, and it was just an abundance of good things. Now, when I should say that abundance of good things ran into a terrible thing, which is at the peak of my success, I got a serious depression, and it just kind of dropped me back from the whole thing. And it allowed me, it took a while to get out of it, but you know, when you come out of something like that, you're just so grateful for, you know, what you have much more than you were before. And so Jerry and I rededicated our life to significance. And so there's another part that you probably need to know about. There's also the concept of finish line. And so you all should set your life up so you have some idea of what your definitions of enough is. So when I was around your age, you know, was making more than I had planned, and you know, it was a nice thing, but you just kind of get in. What I do is I just make money, you know, and then help people make things. So I had about 30 older people in my life, and I just like to get, you know, with people one-on-one and just ask questions that I have, and you should do the same. Like I just said, like, well, how do you know when you have enough? And it was deer in the headlights. These are wonderful people. They're smart people, super successful people, very wealthy people, very influential people. But I asked them, you know, how much is enough? And it was literally just, I never really thought about it. So it must be more, you know, than I have now. And I remember one guy said to me, well, I don't know, Britt, if I had $50 million free and clear with no debt, I guess that would be enough. Ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing wrong with having $50 million as long as it's not ruining your life. But to believe that you have to have $50 million to have enough is what? Literal insanity. You know, you're just totally disconnected from the real world. The average income of a household in America is like maybe $55,000, and they get along just fine. How do you get so disconnected that you feel like you have to have $50 million to have enough? So we established a finish line, and we were 32, and we did it through, Julie and I did it together, and through contemplation, prayer, counsel, we came up with a number and a time. And of course, then I had no idea why it was that time and that number, but look, now I do. And then we just kind of went happily on our way. And there's a great freedom when you actually know where the finish line is. Because you have a day when you walk into the office thinking like, I'm $1.43 away from the finish line. And if you can make $1.43 that day, you walk out and think, all right, I'm over the finish line. But then you have a whole new set of questions. And by the way, what I just described for you, I just hope every one of you will do it. Figure out realistically, I never changed it. Julie and I spent the time, we never changed our finish line. Everybody said, well, how many times did you change it along the way? Because that's what people do. Well, if I had this, we thought about it seriously, and we had a number at a time, and we stuck with it. But this is like when we were 32, and then but we also kind of forgot about it, along the way, because you're just living life. But so anyway, so we crossed our finish line. And then the question is, well, what do you do now? Because I'm working at Bridgewater, and at this time, this was really the start of when hedge funds started to boom in institutional. Believe it or not, folks, we were doing everything we could to stop the money from coming in. We just going to make it hard for people to invest with us. So we're going to raise our fees, and we're going to tell you, if you don't have $100 million, please don't call us. And you can give us that $100 million to manage if you show up, on August the 3rd at 2 p.m. If you miss that window, then we're sorry. And you know what that did? All of us geniuses who are trying to slow things down, it created a scarcity value that just caused everybody to rush in. So the money was just literally pouring in over the top of the walls. People were not doing any due diligence. They were it's kind of like the housing market now. They were just getting in. So now here I am at Bridgewater, and really wonderful place. And Ray Dalio and Bob Prince are two of my closest friends, and we talk pretty often. And but I had asked myself, was that the highest purpose, for my life? Because at this point, when you get past the finish line, you have another question, which is, what's the purpose of more than enough? So you have this option, which is, well, what should I do now? And your first instinct is, well, I'll just quit everything and I'll go to, some faraway place in the jungle, and I'll live the rest of my life there. And some people do that, and that's a good thing, but that's not really the calling for most people. But so I had the option of leaving Bridgewater, which is, again, everything Vivek said about it is right. I can't speak high enough for them, although they've had some ethical problems, which, I've helped them deal with and they've dealt with. It's really more moral problems, by the way, just misbehavior. And so at this point, we're shifting to this life of significance. And we said, well, I get this phone call out of the blue, and this is going to happen to all of you. If you develop a really strong reputation and you're for high character and for effectiveness and for, growth and making things work, everything just comes to you. You don't really have to go out and seek everything. People are out seeking everything and forgetting to do a great job every single day. So anyway, so this, all of a sudden, this they call me from Texas and say, well, we've got a fund here. It's $100 billion. And it's not performing very well. And would you come and help us? And I said, well, which fund is it? And they said, it was the Texas Teachers Retirement Fund. Well, my parents, my dad was a pastor, and my mother was a teacher. So I really have an affinity for this fund. It's, all of a sudden helping people who I wasn't helping them get their second or third island, which is, again, nothing wrong with that, but just for me personally, to sit there and think about a teacher who maybe makes $50,000, $60,000 a year. And, I like the role of Robin Hood. So I remember a story of Robin Hood. Robin Hood takes from the rich and gives to the poor. And I'm talking about taking returns that go to the rich and giving them to the poor. And of course, teachers are not poor, but I'm just talking to the folks who really need it. So that enlivened my life. And now I'll answer the question that and we started Titans. And Titans is really about, it's in the finance program, but it's really stealth, just because it's about life. And one of the first things I recognized was that relationships were breaking down in your generation, that you weren't, particularly for very successful people. That I asked folks, my first two interns back in 1999, like, what was your college experience like? And they said, we passed out of like half of our credits, and we took these classes and we got these grades, and we, got into the honors program, and we got into the investment club or whatever it was. And I realized their college experience was resume building, which it unfortunately kind of is nowadays. And I said, well, like, what kind of close long-term friendships did you make? And many of them said, not the ones I really wanted to, because to make that 3.9 just took up so much time. And so I wanted to form a group of high capacity, high character people that were really focused on developing lifelong friendships. And then the other thing was, what is missing from the educational experience that's very valuable, maybe even more the most valuable thing. So every one of you and everybody that I might consider for Titans, you all have three things in common. Number one is you've got a good work ethic. Number two, you've got ambition. Hopefully ambition that's healthy, but you have ambition, you want to do well. And number three is you're technically competent. What you're showing when you get that A is like, I'm technically competent at this moment in time for this hour. I have a lot of technical competence, way more than the typical person. And that's all fine and good. It's just not ultimate. So the ultimate thing is wisdom. How do I become somebody who just brings a lot of wisdom into the world? And nobody studies that. Nobody thinks that. And everybody knows that at the end of the day, the things that really matter, are how much wisdom you have and how much wisdom you can express for yourself and others, and how great your relationships are. I mean, that's kind of the story of life. And so when everybody's working on their technical competence, other people working on their technical competence, they're also trying to accelerate wisdom, and they're trying to accumulate high character, high quality friends, which based on what Vivek said about this program, is pretty much what you guys are doing. And so when I started it, it was an experiential class. I didn't really know what I was doing. And those who are in Titans know that 16 years later, I still don't really know what I'm doing. But if you surround yourself with these great people, just magic happens. It's just really a strange thing, because all of a sudden, you just have these like-minded people who have all different kinds of views about everything, but they're devoted to seeking truth, and they're devoted to seeking high quality, real deep, lifelong relationships. Whenever I think about relationships, I think of Callie, who's on the phone here. So Callie went all over the world. If you ever want to travel with your friends, get Callie Lowe involved, because she will organize every single thing. You'll have a great relationship. So that's some of what we're talking about. And now the program, you don't know where these things are going to go. You believe they're going to be good because you've got a growth mindset, but you don't get to where we are now, where we're written about in books, and we've got almost 800, alumni all over the place, and it's kind of a small army. And it's the army that's going to change the world, because they're all trained in this narrow path way. So what is the narrow path? First of all, why would I find a narrow path? Because there's two worldviews, and I'm of the worldview that God exists. So that's my source of truth, and I try to be complicit with that. And I have a lot of friends who don't believe that, and they're fantastic people. They just have to find another way to know right. We all have to solve the problem about, like, how do I want to live my life? What's right and wrong? What's good and bad? We all have the same problems. So one of the things I want to establish, you should write this down, like, you need to know your source of truth. Like, a true seeker is not really a true seeker if they don't know what the source of truth is, and haven't examined what the source of truth is. So one of the most famous sermons has ever been given, probably the most famous sermon, is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And at the end of it, he says, enter by the narrow gate. Wide is the gate and broad is the path that leads to destruction, and most take it. Always have a little bit of a skepticism of things where most people do it. Because the more you go towards what most people do, not always bad, but the more that you're sort of conforming to a certain thing, and you're absorbing yourself in a crowd as opposed to seeking your own path. But the other one is entered by the narrow gate. For narrow is the gate, and narrows the way that leads to life, and few find it. And so Titans is trying to create the type of leader that goes through, that follows the narrow gate path, which leads to life, life for themselves, life for their families, life for their community, life for their country. And yes, later on, you guys, life for your country. And so there's, that would be a whole nother lesson. But so that was one. Then there's another scripture that is in Matthew chapter 10. It's, for me and for business people, it's really fantastic. It's in, Jesus says, you're a sheep among wolves. Be as shrewd as a serpent and as innocent as a dove. You're a sheep among wolves. Be as shrewd as a serpent and as innocent as a dove. So, you're going out into a world that's rough. That's wonderful and rough. It's wonderful too, but it's rough. It's competitive. People do things that are wonderful, and some people do things like, I can't believe somebody would do that. And you're in there trying to create a competitive advantage for yourself, and for your family and for your company and everything. And so when you hear you're a sheep among wolves, you think, oh my gosh, I'm just here to be slaughtered. But obviously that's not the end of the verse. Then the verse says, be as shrewd as the serpent and as innocent as a dove. So I don't know how many of y'all know your Bible well, but in the first part of the Bible, there was shrewdness that defeated innocence. And so Jesus is coming back saying, hey, maybe we have shrewdness and innocence. Be a nice thing. But, there's two types of shrewdness. There's the shrewdness of the world and there's the shrewdness of God. And, so I think about some football terminology. When I'm competing, like if I'm a football player, kind of like I'm competing against another team. I want to know what their tendencies are. I want to know, oh, they got an all-American middle linebacker. Let's get two or three people on that guy. Their defensive back is only 5'7". We got a guy who's 6'7". Let's make sure they're matched up. They are very aggressive. Well, let's run counter plays so you can anticipate what the competition is doing. But then you don't play the game the way that they play it. In my terminology, you play it according to spiritual rules, the rules of the Lord. And so that's in that way you're shrewd. But you also have to be blameless in your conduct. That's what the innocent is. If you're shrewd and not innocent, then you're just like everybody else. Of course, if you're innocent and not shrewd, you may be that sheep that's being led to the slaughter. So I would just encourage everybody to think about the way to compete in life is to be shrewd in a proper way and blameless in your conduct at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you, Britt. Thank you. I think it's an incredible introduction to the intentions behind Titans and the narrow path way. And if we can, with about 15 minutes, I promise I'd keep you here only until the New York Fed needs you, which make sure that they don't break anything, please. The next part is taking this to the global stage. And I genuinely am very happy that we've started here because there's a lot that we're thinking about. And Britt, I'm going to mute you just for a second, just because there's some echo, and then you can unmute. So two different things. One thing that comes to mind when we talk about shrewdness and innocence, and then the other thing that you've said that really stands out is how much is enough. And I want to take this question to the global stage. How much is enough in the sense of how much growth is enough is kind of an open question that KERNEL is experientially trying to understand. We have to answer that question on the individual level, but also as a kind of global market, as a global people, we have to decide how much is enough in terms of the ways that we are growing, and if those ways are, let's say, regenerative, restorative, they impact our public spaces in the right types of way, they create the conditions for the right types of engagement. And in Ethereum specifically, we talk a lot about public goods problems and how for so long public goods have been underfunded and how in so many ways there are mismatches between the things that derive value to our lived experiences and the ways that money flows. So one of the questions around how much is enough is, kind of a question of like, how do we make our money work in a way over the next 30 years that better impacts our lived experience and allows us to maintain the innocence of the planet, the innocence of the people that are on it. And if you'll allow me just a couple more thoughts here, like one of our instincts might be, overthrow everything, say that, the current financial system is broken, everything that's gotten us here is completely broken. But there's actually another story that's from the Bible that we have in the syllabus, which is about Jesus throwing the tables out of the temple. And it wasn't the case, we make the case that it wasn't fundamentally incompatible that faith and finance could go together, that we could live both shrewdly and innocently. But the reason that Jesus decided to do that is because the authorities were taking from the people. And if you control the temple, you could use it to manipulate commercial transactions. So it was this type of power structure that Jesus was focused on, at least in the way that we interpreted it here. So the question ultimately, with our last 12 to 15 minutes to make sure we keep you on time, is how do you think of the next 30 years when we talk about global markets, when we talk about the way that we can live and create markets that allow us to find that middle path?
All right, that's that's a great question, and your generation is bringing in this notion of sustainability, and ESG is literally the number one theme everywhere, all around the world. And so the change is good, but you just you got to be careful you don't kill the golden goose in the process. You don't see a lot of people moving to other countries. You see a lot of people trying to move into our country. So dispel yourself of the idea that it's better someplace else. America has citizens have it the best of every general citizen around the world. But unfortunately, every economic system is just, or they're all imperfect, and they're all about how you allocate scarce resources. And at the end of the day, just imagine that whatever the system is, it'll turn out to be like, how do I allocate scarce resources to myself, first of all, and then through that other folks. We're at a tipping point in an era here. So back last September, I went to our board and I said, look, we have ended the era that has been in place since 1980. When I came out of college, believe it or not, the S&P was at 100. So when you have to say, like, have you seen it all? Well, yeah, I have. I missed the first 100. And I won't go through all the details, but it took 40 years to run this through this era. And, the era is now ending, and we're not really sure exactly what the next era is going to be like. But always remember that all the problems you hear and all the things that happen is everybody's out there working to make things, out there trying to make things work well. You got 8 billion people on the planet who are trying to make things work well. And so we normally figure it out, so we should always have an optimistic attitude about the future, but also a realistic attitude or a sober attitude about what needs to happen, to make that occur. So you're going to face some things that are, every generation has, things that they have to face. There's usually about the same number, but the question is, they're not all the same magnitude, and you all are going to have some big ones. First of all, with climate change, that climate change went last year when I was talking about climate change, the estimate for how much it was going to cost was $65 trillion over a 30-year period, $65 trillion. Just to put that in perspective, the United States is 22 trillion. So you're talking about spending is 3 times as much as the economic GDP of the United States on global transition. That was last year. This year, the estimate is 150 trillion. And In the beginning, people would say, this is going to be stimulative. Folks, always be very careful to listen to what is meant by what people say. Because it's not going to be stimulative. It's going to reduce economic growth by about 1% around the world as we free up capital that has otherwise been spent for other reasons to start to build out this energy transition. So everything is a package of really good things and really bad things. And you kind of have to walk the line. So now we're going to be carbon neutral by 2050, and China's going to be carbon neutral by 2060. One of the things I really want to encourage you to do is stay current on your reading and keep an open mind. Don't jump in and buy everything that anybody says. Unfortunately, I have to read 7 different newspapers from all around the world just to sort of create some kind of balanced view, because you can't get one anywhere directly now. So the new story is that if we don't do anything to try to stem climate change, it's going to cost us 300 trillion. But if we do something, it's going to cost us 150 trillion. And folks will call that, stimulative. What they really mean is it's not as bad as it could otherwise be. And so the whole world's working on this. Everywhere you go, it's the dominant theme. And it's going to be there for your entire career as we go through this. And I just want you to know it's going to go up and down. There's going to come a time. Right now, everybody thinks it's going to be free. So there are surveys that go out there like are you for addressing climate change? Of course, everybody says yes. But then there's a second question that says, well, how much are you personally willing to pay for it? 50% of the people say 0. And another 20%, like I say, $500. This is going to massively increase everybody's energy costs for a while, as we make this transition. And it's not going to be all paid by the rich. It's going to be, a lot of it is, but it's the rich don't have $150 trillion to contribute. It's going to be spread out. So there will come a time. So just, knowledge is power. When this happens, you're going to have to bowl through it when energy costs are going to be higher and your service is going to be worse. You're going to have brownouts and things like that. And because it's just not going to be straightforward, smooth sailing, all the way. So that's one that these things are going to be here for your entire career. I just put a little caveat here. Say something sort of negative, and I'll say something surprisingly positive. The reason I say you have to stay current on your reading is the International Energy Agency or Association, big deal for the entire energy complex, came out with a report, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, that said we can't get there from here. Unless everybody stops all their drilling activity right now, which of course that would throw the world into a depression. So they've already said we can't get there from here by 2050. And then they looked at the United States and said that the United States definitely can't get there, because to get the solar that we need requires a lot of minerals that we don't have in abundance, and we have to mine. So usually have people come out who they see the big picture, but they don't know much about the execution of what is actually required. So the people who are objective about this now are saying it's 2070. And what does this actually mean? It means that at 2050 or 2070, that we will stop emitting carbons into the air. But we already have emissions that are in the air, and it'll take another 50 years for those to die down. So this is a lifetime endeavor. And if you read academic, you always try to read the edges of academia, because it was 3 or 4 years ago at the edges of academia, they were trying to redefine optimal. So optimal historically has been defined as maximum per capita GDP. And they were saying that's not optimal because we end up getting stuff we don't need, and we divert capital away from things that we do need. And so they were redefining optimal as not 3% global growth, but 2% global growth, so they could free up this 1% for the energy transition. So that's one. Now, number two is China has been in a 100-year phase. Literally, this is not me just kind of translating it. This is the way that, like, the first phase was 1949 to 1980, when they just tried to reestablish their institutions and get their people fed. They did the first one really well. They did the second one terribly. They almost starved everybody to death. But in 1980, they moved to the second phase, their collaborative phase, where they reached out to the world and tried to inject themselves into the industrial world by collaborating. Like, if you like to make tennis shoes, they cost you $10. If you make them over here, it'll only be $2. And the strategy was to move up the industrial scale. And in the strategy, it literally says, but don't threaten the leader. And so that second phase is over. And now they're in the third phase. And the third phase is take the throne. And by the way, if this was reversed, if we were number two, we'd probably be doing the same thing, right? And so this is an economy that right now is 15 trillion, we're 22 trillion. They're 1.4 billion people, we're 330 million people. Their average, just remember, their average standard of living is about 11,000 US dollars. And the minimum for a developed economy is 12,000. So their power comes from their vast number, and she has two objectives. One is to make sure that the folks feel like they're progressing. So they go from 11,000 to 11,500 to 12,000 to 12,500. For 1.4 billion people. But it's an autocracy, which means it's command and control. And so he has a $15 trillion checkbook. And so he pays the people what they need to advance. And they're targeting certain industries to move forward. And so two areas that they're targeting are obviously technology. They want to become self-sufficient. Right? So they've been connected to the outside world. They've been kind of dependent on the US. They want to de-link and become self-sufficient. And they want to spread autocracy. So just remember that we became the global superpower, ultimately, after the fall of the Berlin Wall. And from that point to this point, 25 countries that were autocracies have become democracies. And there are only 13 autocracies left in the whole world, of which China is one and Russia is another. If China ultimately prevails, then the world will, those 25, just as an example, those 25 countries will return to autocracy. And, and autocracies are really meant for benevolent dictators, is the way it works with relatively poor countries. Singapore had a great leader who, was kind of the sole command and control. But as you process these things through, just ask yourself first, is there a better country in the world than the United States? And my answer is no, there's not even close. Then you ask yourself, well, is the United States perfect? The answer is no, not even close. Just keep those two things, in your mind, because people do not have a better form of government. Now, what happens is, so I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to tell you why we have inequality. And there's a bunch of little reasons around the edge, but this has to do with my third point that I want to leave you with. We have inequality because we have the advancement of technology. The technology is replacing human capital. So I just want you to imagine that you have a company, it makes $100. You got 4 employees and yourself. Each employee gets 20, you get 20. And everybody has companies like that. And then all of a sudden, Dan comes in and spoils the party by coming up with a piece of technology that can replace 3 of the workers. And you say to yourself, I don't want to replace my workers. I love my workers. And so you say, no, I'm not gonna use the technology. I'm gonna keep my workers. Well, then I'm looking here and Angela comes in and says, what are you talking about? We have to keep track. We've got to use the best tools that we have. We've got to take this technology. And then she takes it and she replaces 3 of the workers. And now all of a sudden you don't have to grow, still $100, but now one worker goes from, let's say, 20 to 30, and the capital owner goes from 20 to 70 because of the technology. We're diverted by a lot of these other things, which are important. They shouldn't be ignored. But until you're dealing with a root cause, you really can never solve problems because we're being distracted by things that are not the root. And so the third thing I want you to be aware of is, whenever you think the beginning of time was, there was at that time physical productivity and mental productivity. And let's just say they're both nearly zero. Well, for the next, whatever number of years you think it is, till today, we incrementally have replaced physical labor with technology. I mean, all of you probably go to a gym. Yourself 200, 250 years ago, when you said to them, I go to the gym every day. I pay $100 or $200 to exercise. I use stretchy bands. I do hot yoga. They would look like you're insane. Like, what? After the whole day of working, you actually, because that wasn't even a concept, but we replaced physical labor now with technology. And now we're into the second technology era, which is replacing mental labor. And so this is going to happen much faster than, the thousands of years it took to replace physical labor, because this is not my belief, but if you're strictly totally evolution and that's all survival of the fittest and natural selection, that's all you have. And I believe in all that stuff. I just don't think that's all there is. The reason that humankind is here is because we're the top decision maker. We're, of all the things that are currently living, a human being is the one who can make decisions the best. That is going to be incrementally encroached on by technology. And so one of the issues you guys are going to have to deal with is, how do you stay in front of the technology, and how do you protect people from the ravaging of the replacement that's going to occur? So, and you know what? Terrible, hard problems to solve, you're going to solve them. You're going to solve them because you're going to think about it and you're going to come up with an answer. I can give you a couple answers now, but I have to go the Fed.
We'll save them. If you share them with the Fed, that's probably the best place to start. And Britt, the gift that you've given us is a place for this type of discourse. And more important even than global markets is the discussions about our lives together. And so putting those two things together means so much that you've been able to give us this space, and it's been a gift. So thank you.
Well, it's a gift to me to be able to speak to you, and we only covered 2 of the 3 questions. And I'm, if you give them to Vivek, if you have questions or you have things that I've said, I don't know if I really agree with that. That's fantastic. Let's put all the ideas into the ring and seek the truth, and everybody be open to whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. You guys are awesome. What do you want me to tell the Fed, Vivek?
Tell them that Kernel and Titans are going to take over the world, but tell them not to tell anyone else.
Okay. I will deliver the message.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Britt.
you.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Guys, we're gonna stick on the show. If you want to stay, I'm going to do a couple of things to keep us going before coming back to hopefully a great discussion around what Britt has left us with. There are many parts of it that are open to discourse, and I don't think we got into the crypto country angles that we may be exploring, but I think that Britt would be very happy to hear about them into the future. The things to continue with are that there are some things to kind of end with today. And I wanted to keep going with a bit of the things that are at the end of the syllabus. We've talked about the two modules to some degree with scalability and giving, but we haven't necessarily gotten to talk through the curated materials. And as I always do, I'll put my crypto wandering friend on the spot perhaps a little bit here to see A, if he has any reactions, but B, if he would care to bring us home today before we get into like Q&A and thoughts, and then eventually to gather time to hang out on this idea of the gift of no paradigm is perfection, how that might relate to some of the things that have already been shared today.
Thank you so much. I think it's important that we get to Q&A fast, because the kinds of dialogic space where cultural thinking, like Anne is talking about, can take place, happen there and not here. I have very few things to say. I think that one of the aspects of what Britt said that I would like to reflect most deeply is this notion that you have to know where the source of truth is for you, that it is a profound and deep insight that will continue to unfold more and more and more if you explore that honestly, sincerely, with courage and with humility. I think that understanding what the source of truth is as you experience it is the straightest and most narrow route to coming up with a way of defining what is enough and when is enough in your own life that is appropriate and which does not shift with the changing expectations of each time. It's really important that Britt mentioned how he came to his own notion of the finish line through meditation and prayer. Prayer is something that is mentioned in the syllabus, in the gift, as the most effective way I certainly know of to develop your own internal language of need. That's when you are able to communicate just to yourself how much you need and become fully aware and conscious of the depth and breadth of your own needs and dependencies, then it is from that place that you can offer those needs as invitations to others without projecting the expectation that they will necessarily fulfill your needs. And that is the rock bottom of true, honest, horizontal conversation, which is the golden thread that runs through this entire experience and syllabus. And moreover, it is sort of informed, I think, most deeply by this idea of no paradigm, right? And the perfection of truth as it is manifest in you. There is, a quote that Vivek shared a little bit earlier in the chat, which is really wonderful. He picked a Thomas Merton quote, which is really funny because if you go to the home page of Module 7, the first quote is written by a man called Daisetsu Suzuki, and it actually comes from a book written by Thomas Merton. He was in conversation with Daisetsu Suzuki, and the book's name is Zen and the Birds of Appetite, and it's Thomas Merton, this Catholic priest, in conversation with Daisetsu Suzuki, the man who brought Zen to the West. And Suzuki says there, because this is the other golden thread along with horizontal conversation in the syllabus, he says the opposition, as it were, between container and contained, between the background and the stage, between the field and the players moving on it. The good and the evil play their opposing parts on the field, which remains neutral and indifferent and open or empty. It is like rain that falls on the just and the unjust. When we come through meditative, reflective, self-examining practices like prayer to develop a language of internal need that allows us to understand the source of truth as it manifests in our lives, we can begin to see how these complementary opposites that we've been working with for 8 weeks do not only have the form of some kind of spectrum and polarity, but rather that they take the form of container and contain, theater and background and stage, right? There is a subtlety and a dynamism to these opposites and the source from which both arise that can only be spoken of from a place of experience, that can only be transmitted through a pure heart, whatever that means in your own experience. And it is, I think, one of the best places to end by coming back to where we began with these complementary opposites and saying there is beneath the constant interplay of duality, space and time, light and dark, heat and cold, the realization that in fact dark depends on the lights, and that there is no such thing as cold. The only thing that we can do is measure the kinetic energy of molecules. We can only measure heat. And while these two things exist necessarily to help us understand the concept of duality, myself and other, space and time, gatheredness and separation, when we can be courageous enough to be honest about our own needs and seek sincerely and truly the source of our own truth, we come to realize that there is this empty field out there beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, where we will meet people like Jalaluddin Rumi, and where the soul can lie down and the grass and the world, and this world is too full to talk about.
If you whittle it down for Kernel beyond the Web3 stuff, I think the best way I've put it is that it's about people and poetry. And I want to end with a poem from Mary Oliver, which is the last link in the syllabus. And I'm only going to read it about halfway down, but it's on the screen right now. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? This is from Mary Oliver, who is a wonderful person to end on. The only person perhaps better in this particular context is a particular thank you to Tegan Horton, who in our first Fireside and the one just previous to this shared a couple of poems that are incredibly meaningful, and I will always remember, especially given the context within which they were shared. The fact that she wrote them during the Firesides is something that I still haven't been able to wrap my head around, and I am always grateful for them. They are in this slide deck, which I'll put in the chat if you want to read them in quiet moments. And there is one that has made its way to be the first blog post on the Kernel blog, which is called There's Freedom in Learning. I don't have much else to say. We will be moving to the Kernel Cafe for the last 50 minutes, where hopefully we get to say some goodbyes to KB3. There are many, many, many people to thank. And there are many, many people who have been incredibly active during Kernel. This list is non-comprehensive, but we did want to explicitly call out some of the people that have been active, engaged, involved, and willing to trust us, and also to be trusted members of this space that we hope to continue co-creating. I won't even try to go through all the names, but I want to say thank you to everyone who's been on this call, who's spent time with us in a chat room, in a Junto, exploring even one module of the syllabus, considering what Web3 could be through this particular lens. And the beauty is that this is about the halfway point. The kernel experience is happening very early in the Web3 story and very early in many of our careers. And from a professional and personal perspective, my hope is that this gives you ideas and a place that feels like home that you can explore for many, many moons to come. So thank you. And we will see you hopefully in the cafe right now. There is a showcase that will showcase some of the projects in KB3 that are most best suited for an environment of focus on fundraising at this point. And there will be at least 25 to 30 projects represented there. So that's one last event, but the most important one is happening right now in the cafe. Angela's already put the link in the chat, but if you can make it there, that'll be great. We had to take the piano out, I'm pretty sure, because it cost a lot of money to keep when we have more than 25 people, but still a fun place to hang out. And the link is now in the chat. I'm sure we'll put it in Slack too soon, but meet you there if you have some time. We'll be there at least for the next 50 minutes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone, for being here. We'll see you guys soon.
Much love, Vivek and Colonel.
It is web-based, Noreen. Thanks, Nathan. Thank you, Ali. Let's see, party's starting over here. You can join from phone though, Noreen, just so you know. People are here. There might be a Pokemon. Cool. Safe travels home, Noreen. Be careful. Thank you, Sparrow. Thank you, thank you. I'm hiding from people in Gathertown so I don't cause problems. Don't come too close, Kyle. I'm literally hiding behind a tree. Don't find me, Kristen. Don't do it. Don't do it. Thank you, James. Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else in Zoom? I see Z. Ting Ting. RV. Thank you, RV. Thank you. Thank you. Ryan. Hope you guys can make it to Gathertown. Mufti, hope you can make it. Thank you. Justin's here. Julia's in Gather. I don't know if Z is in Gather yet. Cool. I'm going to head over there in a second, but just let me know if you have any questions before I drop the Zoom. See Leah trying to find me. Okay. Okay. Take your time, Z. Enjoy the time with the young one. Thank you, Z. Thank you for being a part. Thank you. Yeah. Gathertown link. Lisa made it. Nice. Put the link in Slack, Sachin, unless you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Truly. It's been a joy. I'm super excited for the future too, because there's so much that's still to unfold.
100%. And I think some people from earlier blocks kind of hung out in this block. Can I hang out in the next block? Can we kind of like do that thing?
Definitely. There's
Yes.
no way Yes, no way we want to create any distance. Yeah, you're be in the Slack, people will join the same Slack, and all of the invites and stuff are public.
Awesome. I'm gonna stay in Slack for sure. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, I'll see you over in the
Yeah.
cafe here.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah, Mike.
Cool. All right. For the party people still in here, I'm about to close it. Adrella, Desua, let me know if you guys have anything else. If not, see you guys there if you can make it. Great to have you, as always. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.